I didn't grow up with money, so when my friend Evan invited me to spend a long weekend at his family's lake house, I acted casual, but inside, I was counting down the days like it was a holiday. The place was 2 hours from the city, tucked at the end of a thin, winding road lined with pine trees so dense they turned the afternoon light green. The lake appeared suddenly through the trees, flat, dark, and still, like a sheet of black glass. Evan's family's cabin was big, but old. The wood siding had faded to a tired gray, and the porch sagged in the middle like a bent knee. The air smelled like wet leaves and cold water. "Welcome to paradise," Evan said, grinning as he carried our bags up the steps. The first thing I noticed was the dock. It stretched out into the lake, narrow and crooked, boards warped from years of weather. A small boat was tied to the end, bumping softly against the wood. Even in daylight, it looked like the kind of place you wouldn't want to stand alone at night. We were there in late September. The lake season was basically over. No neighbors making noise. No kids shouting. No jet skis. Just wind, creaking trees, and water that never seemed to move unless you stared at it long enough. Inside, the cabin smelled like dust and old smoke. Evan's dad had left us a list on the counter. 1. Lock the doors at night. 2. Don't leave food outside. 3. If you hear anything on the dock after dark, don't go out there. Evan laughed when he read it. "My dad is dramatic," he said. "He thinks raccoons are serial killers." I laughed too, but I copied that third rule into my brain without meaning to. That first evening, we cooked burgers and drank cheap beer. The sky turned purple over the lake. The trees became silhouettes. At some point, Evan stepped onto the porch with a cigarette, and I followed. The lake was quiet in a way that made my ears ring. In the distance, something made a soft splash. Probably a fish, I told myself. Then the dock creaked. Not a normal creak, like wood settling. This was a slow, deliberate groan, like weight shifting from one board to the next. Evan lifted his head. "You hear that?" "Probably the boat," I said. But the boat wasn't moving much. The water was too still. Another creak. Closer to shore. Evan squinted into the darkness. "Hello?" he called like an idiot. No answer. The only thing that came back was the faintest sound of water against wood. Evan shrugged like he didn't care, flicked his cigarette into the yard, and went back inside. I stayed on the porch for a few seconds longer. I don't know why. It was like I expected to see someone step out of the dark. Nothing. Just the dock, and the lake, and a feeling crawling up my spine that I couldn't explain. That night, we played cards in the living room until after midnight. The cabin had big windows facing the lake, and we kept the curtains open because it felt cozy, like we were in a snow globe. Only, instead of snow, it was darkness pressing against the glass. At around 1:30, Evan went to the bathroom. I was alone in the living room, shuffling the cards, when I heard it again. A creak. From the dock. Then another. And another. Slow. Steady. Like someone walking toward the cabin. I froze with the deck of cards in my hands. The footsteps stopped, and for a moment the cabin was silent except for the refrigerator humming. Then the dock creaked again, but this time it was heavier. A long groan. Like someone had stepped onto the last board, right where it met the shore. And then came the sound that turned my stomach inside out. A wet dragging noise. Like something being pulled along the wood. I stood up, heart pounding so hard it made my throat feel tight. I looked out the window toward the dock. The moonlight was thin, but enough to see shapes. The dock was empty. No movement. No person. No animal. Just empty boards stretching into a lake that looked like ink. I remember whispering, "Nope." Evan came back into the room and saw my face. "What?" "Someone's on the dock," I said. My voice sounded too small for how big my fear felt. Evan rolled his eyes. "Dude, it's probably..." The dragging noise happened again, louder now. And it wasn't coming from the dock anymore. It was coming from under the porch. Right below our feet. Evan stopped talking. We stood there, listening. A slow scrape. A pause. Another scrape. Like something was trying to pull itself up. Evan moved toward the front door, but I grabbed his arm. "Your dad literally wrote not to go out there," I hissed. Evan swallowed. He stared at the door like he was arguing with himself. Then the scraping stopped. A beat of silence passed. And then something knocked on the glass. Not the front door. The living room window. One single, firm tap. We both snapped our heads toward it. The window was a big one, almost floor to ceiling. And there, pressed against it, was a hand. Pale. Wet. Fingers long, the nails dark and ragged. It wasn't smearing like a normal hand would. It was just resting there, as if the person on the other side was perfectly calm. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. Evan's voice broke. "Who the hell is that?" The hand slid upward slowly, like it was testing the glass. Then a face leaned into the window. Not fully. Just enough for us to see the outline of a head, and the shine of something that might have been eyes. Water ran down the glass. The face didn't look like a normal person's face. It looked swollen, like it had been in water too long. The skin seemed too tight in places and too loose in others. And the mouth, if it was a mouth, was slightly open, showing teeth that didn't look human. Evan backed away so fast he bumped into the couch. I stumbled too, my legs finally working again. I grabbed the poker from beside the fireplace, not because I thought it would help, but because holding anything felt better than holding nothing. The face stayed there for maybe 10 seconds. Then it pulled away. We waited. No sound. No scraping. No footsteps. Evan whispered, "Call someone." I fumbled my phone out. No service. Evan tried his. Nothing. Of course. The cabin was in the middle of nowhere, and we joked about that earlier like it was part of the charm. Now it felt like a trap. We turned off the lights without even discussing it. Then we sat on the floor behind the couch, like two kids hiding from a thunderstorm, listening for any sound. Minutes passed. Then we heard it. Footsteps. Not on the dock. Inside the cabin. Above us. On the second floor. Evan's eyes went wide. "No," he mouthed. We hadn't gone upstairs once since arriving. Evan had told me the upstairs was just extra bedrooms and an old storage room. The only reason we hadn't used it was because the downstairs had more than enough space. The footsteps moved slowly across the ceiling, then stopped directly above the living room, right above the window where the face had been. And then, from the staircase, came a sound like someone placing a hand on the railing. Wood creaked. Something began to descend the stairs. Not fast. Not rushed. Like it knew we were there, and it wanted us to feel every second. Evan leaned close to me, whispering, "I'm going to run to the kitchen and grab a knife." He started to move, but the moment he shifted, the footsteps on the stairs stopped. Dead still. Like whatever was up there had been listening for that exact change. Evan froze mid-crawl. I held my breath so hard my chest hurt. Then the footsteps started again, faster this time. A heavy thud. Another. Another. Running down the stairs. Evan panicked and scrambled toward the kitchen. I followed, nearly slipping on the rug. We reached the kitchen and Evan yanked open a drawer, grabbing the biggest knife he could find. We turned back toward the living room. And the footsteps stopped again. Silence. The stairway was empty. No one was standing there. But the air felt different now, heavier. Like the cabin had filled with cold. Then something spoke. Not from the stairs. From the living room window. A voice, low and wet, as if it had to push through water to form words. Evan. Evan's face turned gray. I didn't know how it knew his name. The voice repeated it softer. Evan, come outside. Evan shook his head violently like he could shake the sound away. Come outside, it said again, but this time the voice didn't sound like it was asking. It sounded like it was remembering, like it had said those words before. Like it was repeating a routine. Evan whispered, My mom used to call me like that. I stared at him. What? He swallowed, eyes glued to the window. When I was little, if I stayed out on the dock too late, she'd stand on the porch and say my name like that. My skin prickled. Your mom's alive, right? Evan nodded, but his eyes didn't look convinced. The voice outside dragged out his name again. Then the glass fogged, as if something warm had breathed against it. A shape pressed close. A head. A shoulder. And then came the sound of fingernails slowly scratching down the window, leaving thin, squealing lines. Evan raised the knife, but his hands were shaking so hard it looked like he could barely hold it. I grabbed him and whispered, Back bedroom. Lock it. We ran down the hallway, slammed the bedroom door, and locked it. There was a small window in that room too, but it faced the trees instead of the lake. That somehow felt worse. We sat on the bed, knife between us, listening. For a while, nothing. No steps. No voice. No scratching. Evan whispered, Maybe it left. Right when he said it, the doorknob turned. Slowly. As if someone on the other side was testing it. The knob jiggled once, twice, 3 times. Then stopped. Silence. Evan mouthed, Oh my God! And then we heard the footsteps again. Not upstairs this time. Not on the stairs. Right outside the bedroom door. Standing there. Just waiting. I don't know how long we sat like that. Could have been minutes or hours. Fear messes with time. My mouth went dry. My hands went numb. Every little sound felt like it could be the start of something worse. At some point, the footsteps moved away. We listened as they crossed the living room, and then a creak. From the porch. Then another. From the dock. The footsteps traveled down the dock, board by board, until they reached the end. Then they stopped. And something splashed into the water. A heavy splash. After that, it was quiet. We didn't sleep. Not really. We just sat with the knife until the sky started to turn gray and the shadows softened. When the sun finally came up, Evan and I went outside together, like soldiers stepping onto a battlefield. The dock was wet. Not just from morning dew. Wet like it had been soaked. And on one of the boards near shore there were marks. long, dragged lines, like something had been pulled across it. Evan stared at them, then looked at the lake. I used to swim out there, he said quietly. I didn't ask what he meant, because I already knew. We left that morning. Didn't pack carefully. Didn't clean. Just threw everything in the car and drove until we got signal again. Evan called his dad. He didn't tell him everything, because how do you say it out loud without sounding insane? But he mentioned the dock noises and the scratches and the voice. His dad didn't laugh. He was quiet for a long time, then he said something that stuck with me. Your grandfather drowned out there, he said. Right off the end of that dock. They never found him. Evan stared ahead, gripping the steering wheel. I know, he whispered. What do you mean you know? His dad asked. Evan's voice shook. Because when I was a kid, I used to hear him call me back inside. My sister rented a lake house for her birthday. It was supposed to be a fun weekend, friends, drinks, bonfire, pictures for Instagram. The listing called it peaceful and private, which is just a fancy way of saying you're far away from help. There were 8 of us. The house was huge, the kind of place with tall windows and a wide deck facing the water. The lake was calm, but the fog sat low over it even in the afternoon. The first weird thing happened the moment we arrived. The owner left a key in a lockbox and a note on the counter. Please do not use the downstairs guest room. No reason. Just that. One of my sister's friends, Laura, laughed and said, It's haunted. We all joked about it, of course. Because we were adults, and we were there to relax. That night, after we drank and ate and got loud, I went exploring. Not because I'm brave, but because alcohol makes you curious in stupid ways. I found the stairs leading down. The basement smelled colder, like damp wood. At the bottom was a hallway with one light bulb hanging from the ceiling. It swung slightly as if it had been disturbed recently. At the end of the hallway was a doorway. But no door. Just a doorway leading into a room that looked wrong. The room was furnished like a guest room, bed, dresser, small lamp, but the air inside seemed thicker, like walking into a freezer. The walls were the same as the rest of the house, but the paint was darker, like it had absorbed years of smoke. I stepped inside and immediately felt like someone was behind me. I turned. The hallway was empty. I told myself to stop being dramatic and walk toward the bed. That's when I noticed the sheets. They were neatly tucked, but stained in spots with faint brown marks, like old water damage, except it wasn't on the mattress. It was on top, on the fabric. Then I saw the closet. It was open. And inside, hanging from the rod, was a single outfit, a woman's dress, old-fashioned, pale yellow. Just one dress. No other clothes. No hangers. I stared at it longer than I should have, and then the light bulb in the hallway flickered. Not like a power surge. Like something passing underneath it. I backed out of the room, and as soon as I stepped into the hallway, I heard a sound from behind me. A soft, slow exhale. Right at ear level. I spun around and the room was empty. But the dress in the closet was swaying. Like someone had just brushed past it. I went upstairs, trying to laugh it off, but my skin wouldn't stop crawling. Later that night, around 3 a.m., I woke up to my sister calling my name from the hallway. Hey, she said. Are you awake? I sat up. Yeah. What's wrong? She stood there in the dark, just her outline. Did you go downstairs earlier? My stomach tightened. Why? She hesitated. Because Laura is missing. That jolted me fully awake. What do you mean missing? My sister whispered. We can't find her. Her phone's upstairs. Her shoes are here. We woke everyone up and searched the house. We checked the deck, the dock, the bathrooms, outside around the fire pit. Nothing. Finally, someone suggested the basement. The moment we stepped down there, the air changed. It got colder with every step, and the hallway light bulb was swinging like a pendulum, even though there was no breeze. We reached the guest room at the end. And now there was a door. A plain wooden door shut tight. We all stopped. My sister whispered, There wasn't a door before. I couldn't speak. My mouth felt numb. One of the guys, Mark, tried the knob. Locked. He knocked. Laura? No answer. He knocked harder. Laura, stop messing around! Still nothing. Then, from inside the room, came a soft scratching sound. Like fingernails on wood. We backed up. The scratching moved upward, slow, like something dragging its fingers along the inside of the door. And then a voice whispered from the other side. Not Laura's voice. A woman's voice, thin and tired. Don't open it. We ran upstairs. We didn't even argue. We grabbed keys, jackets, anything. When we got outside, the fog over the lake was thicker now. It swallowed the dock and turned the water into a blank gray sheet. We drove to the nearest police station. They went back with us at dawn. But when we returned, the basement hallway was normal. The guest room had no door again. The police searched the room and found nothing. No Laura. No dress. The closet was empty. The owner's note on the counter was still there, but now the ink looked smeared, like it had gotten wet. And below the warning, words none of us remembered seeing, was one more line, faded but readable. If the door appears, it means she's home. Laura was never found. But here's the part that still makes my stomach flip. A week later, my sister got a package in the mail. No return address. Inside was a pale yellow dress. Old-fashioned. Still damp. When I was 16, my parents bought a small lake house to make memories. Mostly, it made arguments. But the worst memory didn't happen to my parents. It happened to me. The lake was popular in summer. In fall, it belonged to the trees and the silence. That October, my parents forced me to spend the weekend there. No friends, no internet, no escape. I hated it. The first day, I found a red life jacket hanging in the garage. It looked old, sun-faded, but still usable. There was a name written in black marker on the inside, Tyler. I didn't know any Tyler. I asked my dad, and he shrugged. Probably left by the last owner. I tossed it on the floor and forgot about it. That night, I woke up to a soft dripping sound. I followed it downstairs. The kitchen light was off, but moonlight came through the window. And there, hanging over a chair, was the red life jacket. Wet. Dripping onto the floor. I stared at it, confused, then checked the doors. All locked. Windows closed. I didn't touch it. I went back to bed, pretending it didn't matter. In the morning, it was gone. I asked my parents if they moved it. They said no. Later, I went into the garage to prove to myself it was still there. It was. Hanging neatly, like it had never moved. I got angry, because fear at that age turns into anger fast. I grabbed it, marched outside, and threw it into the lake. I watched it float for a second, then slowly tip and sink. Problem solved, I muttered. That night, the dripping sound woke me again. Slower this time. Like wet fabric being squeezed. I went downstairs, heart pounding. The life jacket was back. Hanging over the same chair. Wet. Dripping. And this time, there were handprints on it, dark, damp marks pressed into the red fabric, like someone had grabbed it hard. I backed away, whispering, "No!" From the living room window, I saw movement. A figure standing at the end of the dock. Just a silhouette. Too still. Too straight. I froze, staring. The figure didn't move, but the lake around the dock rippled as if something beneath the surface was shifting. Then the figure lifted an arm and pointed toward the house. Not a wave. Not a gesture. A direct, accusing point. I ran upstairs and woke my dad, screaming that someone was outside. He grabbed a flashlight and went to the porch, shining it over the dock. Nothing. No figure. No footprints. No sound. He came back in annoyed, telling me to stop scaring myself. But when we turned around, the life jacket was gone again. The next morning, my mom found something in the drawer under the phone, an old newspaper clipping. We hadn't put it there. The headline read, "Local boy drowns at lake, body not recovered." The boy's name was Tyler. And the picture, grainy and faded, showed a kid about my age, smiling with braces, wearing a red life jacket. My mother's face drained of color. "Why is this in our house?" My dad tried to act tough, but his voice sounded thin. "Someone's messing with us." That afternoon, we packed up to leave early. As we carried bags to the car, I heard something behind me. A splash. I turned toward the lake. The red life jacket was floating near shore, bobbing gently like it was waiting. And beside it, just under the surface, was a pale shape, like a face looking up through the water. I couldn't see details. Only the suggestion of eyes and a mouth. But I knew it was watching me. My dad grabbed my arm and shoved me into the car. We left fast. A week later, back at our normal home, I woke up in the middle of the night to a soft dripping sound. I sat up, heart racing, already knowing. In the corner of my room, hanging from my closet door, was the red life jacket. Dry this time. But the name inside had changed. It didn't say Tyler anymore. It said my name. I went to a lake house alone after a breakup, thinking solitude would fix me. I wanted quiet. I wanted to sleep without hearing someone else breathe. The cabin was small, 1 bedroom, 1 living room, and a porch facing the lake. The owner was an older guy who handed me the keys and said, almost as an afterthought, "If you see lights across the water at night, don't signal back." I laughed politely, like I thought he was joking. He didn't laugh with me. That first night, I sat on the porch with a blanket and watched the sun vanish behind the trees. The lake darkened until it looked endless. The stars came out sharp and cold. Then I saw them. 2 lights across the water. Far away. Like lanterns on a distant dock. They blinked slowly, as if someone was moving them. I stared for a long time, trying to make sense of it. There were no houses listed on that side. The map showed it as forest. A minute later, a 3rd light appeared. Then a 4th. They formed a loose line, like people standing shoulder to shoulder, holding something bright. My phone buzzed with no notification. The screen lit up on its own, then went dark. I stood up, uneasy. The lights across the water began to move toward me. Not quickly, but steadily, like they were floating over the lake without a boat. I went inside and locked the door. I told myself it was reflections. Campers. Anything. Then the knocking started. Not at my door. At my porch window. A gentle tap, like someone trying to get my attention without scaring me. I didn't move. The tapping continued. Then came a sound like wet hands sliding down glass. A whisper followed, faint but clear. Signal back. I covered my ears like that would help. The whisper repeated, closer this time, like the voice was inside the cabin now. Signal back. I grabbed my phone, hands shaking, and turned on the flashlight. I aimed it at the window without getting too close. Something outside moved. A shadow, tall and thin. And behind it, through the glass, I saw the lake, still and black, and those lights, now much closer. Close enough that I could see they weren't lanterns. They were phone screens. Dozens of them. Held up by figures standing on the water like it was solid ground. All facing my cabin. All perfectly still. My phone flashed again. This time, the camera opened by itself. The screen showed my own face, pale and terrified, but behind me in the image was a crowd. A crowd of wet people standing in my living room, holding up glowing screens. I spun around. Nothing. The room was empty. But my phone camera still showed them, closer now, their faces blurred like the image couldn't focus. Then one of them lifted a hand and pointed directly at me. Just like in the camera. My cabin lights flickered. The air turned icy. Outside, the tapping turned into pounding. Harder. Faster. Like impatience. I ran to the bedroom and locked myself inside. I could hear footsteps moving across the cabin floor, wet footsteps leaving little squeaks as they stepped. A voice called out from the living room in a calm, friendly tone. Come on! Just signal back. I stared at my phone. The flashlight button glowed, begging to be used. My hands shook so hard I nearly dropped it. The owner's warning came back to me, and suddenly I understood it wasn't superstition. It was a rule. I turned the phone off completely, and shoved it under the pillow like it was a living thing. The pounding stopped. The wet footsteps stopped. Silence. Hours passed. Eventually, exhaustion dragged me into shallow sleep. When I woke up, sunlight filled the cabin. Everything looked normal. I convinced myself I'd had some kind of panic episode. Then I went outside. On the porch window, there were handprints. Dozens. Layered over each other, smeared and streaked like the hands had been pressed there a long time. And on the porch floor, leading to the front steps, were wet footprints. Not coming from the lake. Coming from the woods behind the cabin. My uncle owned a lake house with a boathouse attached, one of those wooden structures built on stilts over the water. When I was a kid, it was my favorite place. It smelled like gasoline and old rope. There were fishing nets hanging like cobwebs. When I was 23, my uncle asked me to stay there for a week while he went out of state. Just keep an eye on the place, he said. And don't go into the boathouse at night. I smirked. Why? Is it haunted? He didn't smile. Just don't. The first few days were fine. Quiet. Peaceful. I enjoyed the isolation. Then, one night, I heard something under the floor. A thump. Then a slow scraping, like something rubbing against the wooden stilts beneath the boathouse. I told myself it was a turtle. A fish. Something normal. But the scraping got louder, and it moved in a pattern. Like something circling. I went to the porch with a flashlight and shined it toward the boathouse. The light cut across the dark water, catching the edges of the wooden posts. And then it hit something else. A shape just beneath the surface. Too big to be a fish. Too smooth. It looked like a pale back, rising slightly as if it was breathing. I froze. The shape sank slowly, disappearing into the black water like it had never been there. The next morning, I found the boathouse door unlocked. I knew I'd locked it. Inside, everything was damp. The floorboards were wet, like water had pooled there overnight. A fishing net lay in the middle of the floor, tangled like someone had thrown it down in a hurry. And in the wet dust near the water's edge were marks. Not footprints. Handprints. Long finger marks dragged across the floor, leading toward the ladder that went down into the water. That night, I couldn't stop thinking about it. The lake felt different now, less like scenery, more like a living thing. Around midnight the scraping started again. Louder. Closer. This time it wasn't under the boathouse. It was under the cabin. I sat up in bed, listening. Thump. Scrape. Thump. Like something moving beneath the floor, feeling its way along the underside of the house. Then, from the direction of the boathouse, came a sound that made my blood run cold. A wet, choking cough. Like someone trying to breathe after being underwater too long. It repeated slower, heavier. Then I heard my uncle's voice. Not from outside. From inside the cabin. From the living room. "Hey," it called softly. "Come here a second." I sat frozen in bed. My uncle was out of state. The voice called again, a little more annoyed. "Come on. I need help." I didn't answer. I didn't move. The voice sighed, this long, wet exhale, and then came footsteps. Slow, heavy footsteps crossing the living room floor. Each step sounded like it left water behind. The footsteps reached my bedroom door. The handle turned. I'd locked it. The handle jiggled once, then stopped, as if whoever, or whatever, was on the other side was listening. A pause. Then a new sound began. Scratching. Not at the handle. At the bottom of the door. Like fingers trying to fit underneath. The scratching grew frantic, the nails scraping wood. Then the voice changed. It dropped the fake calm and became something else, something hungry, something tired of pretending. "Open it!" I backed away from the door, pressing against the wall. My mouth wouldn't form words. My brain screamed at me to run, but my body was locked in place. Then the scratching stopped. Silence. A beat passed. And then came a single, slow knock. Polite. Almost human. "Please," it whispered, in my uncle's voice again. "I'm cold." My throat tightened. Tears burned my eyes. I don't know why, but I whispered back. "You're not him." The silence that followed felt thick, offended. Then the voice on the other side of the door whispered something so quiet I almost didn't hear it. "I know." And then the footsteps moved away, wet and heavy, toward the back door. A minute later, I heard the boathouse door slam. Then the lake went still. I didn't sleep. I sat with a kitchen knife until morning. When the sun came up, I went to the boathouse, shaking so badly I nearly fell off the dock. The door was open. Inside, the smell hit me, stagnant water and something rotting. The floorboards were soaked, and the fishing nets were piled in a heap, like someone had tried to build a nest. And in the middle of the boathouse floor was my uncle's tackle box. Open. Inside was a photo I'd never seen before. My uncle, younger, standing with two other men beside the lake. They were smiling, arms around each other. But the thing that made my stomach drop was what was written on the back of the photo in faded ink. "We promised we wouldn't tell anyone what we caught." I called my uncle right then. He answered, sounding sleepy. I asked him, "What happened at this lake?" Silence. Then he said quietly, "You went in the boathouse at night, didn't you?" I told him everything. He didn't deny it. He didn't argue. He just said, "Leave. Right now. Don't look at the water on your way out." As I packed, I heard the scraping again, soft, patient, coming from beneath the boathouse. Like something waiting for night to come back. When I drove away, I kept my eyes on the road. I didn't look at the lake. But in my rearview mirror, I saw something that still makes me sick when I remember it. On the dock, standing perfectly still, was a figure. Tall. Wet. And it was holding up a photo, waving it gently like it wanted me to recognize it. Even from far away, I knew it was the picture from the tackle box. And as the dock faded behind the trees, I swear I saw the figure tilt its head, like it was smiling. Which story scared you the most? Comment below and subscribe for more true horror stories.